after the last PD on some of the surveys, people asked that I not give instructions while the activity is going on, so I tried. I worked hard to do that today. But I am going to start talking because we're kind of out of time. I know some of you came in a bit late. If you're still reading, please feel free to do that. But I want to kind of do the introduction piece to today's PLC, and then we have some activity related to the article there. So if you're still reading, you can do that. You can continue to do that until you're done, but I'm going to move on for the sake of time. Goals for the day today. Obviously, we're focusing on just a conversation about classroom management. I want to kind of highlight the importance of routines and procedures in developing a focused learning culture within your classroom. But really, I think that our building culture is nothing but an extension of all of the individual classroom cultures. So the more consistent we can be as a staff in our procedures, the better it is for our students. I don't expect that we would ever be 100% consistent across all classrooms. But the more consistent we can be in our classroom procedures, the better it is for students. It makes sense that the 740 students should not have to learn 6 different sets of procedures if we can find a way to learn procedures as a staff instead. List critical routines and procedures to be considered when establishing a classroom environment. That's a goal for today. And then just begin reviewing, developing, and reflecting on your current classroom procedures to ensure a focused, efficient classroom operation. And so this all kind of relates back to that student engagement we started talking about at the PD event. And you'll see, I hope in a minute, how it relates back to that. So moving on with the reading assignment there that you have. I prepared this for our first staff meeting, so we're not going to go through this like we would have gone through in the first staff meeting because I only have about 35 minutes. So we're not going to go through this exactly as it is written. Please stick with me and then you won't end up doing additional work. What I would do if this were a classroom setting is I would ask that with your other members, you assign a reporter, and the reporter is responsible for writing down information for your group. The reporter will summarize the information for the whole class. What we just did activity. I not only gave you the reading, but I gave you instructions about how I wanted you to read it, what to look for and what to do. And then the next step would be for you to have a conversation with your group. I am going to ask you to do that, but you don't need to record anything. You don't need to write anything down. I'm not going to ask you to report out by table. But I would like you to take a few minutes and just review the claims that you underlined in the article. What is the author saying in terms of what claims is he making? And determine, have a discussion at your table group about maybe the 3 claims that you feel best summarize the author's purpose or main point. And then discuss these with the others at your table. You don't have to list the claims, just have a conversation about what 3 claims you think are most important in the article. I will give you 3 minutes for a group discussion at the table. What 3 claims you feel the author is making?
Consistency. You have a routine and you follow procedures and you apply facilitate. I'm very respectful. I have a lot of experience. What I do like too is having you manage the store. I wonder if it's whatever. None of which
All right, I'm going to bring you back. So again, if we had a full class period, then what I would ask is that you also look at the key terms that I asked you to identify in the article and describe which 3 key terms best describe the author's purpose. So now I want you to show me that you understand the terms by choosing the ones that you think best relate to the author's purpose. Discuss this with the others at your table and reach a consensus on the 3 most important terms. I'm not going to ask you to list these, but again, I am going to give you 2 minutes to just have a quick conversation about the terms and the ones you feel best summarize the author's purpose. There's actually some research that says that hand-eye coordination games or thinking games are good for kids too in moderation. You have to kind of balance it. Yeah. These are the students who likely be in high school defenders. These students will be great earners. Different. These students and these students are average for the $1 million. That's what I keep telling my daughter. You're understanding. You're going to make $1 million more than your peers within a year. Which means I get to retire early. All right, again, I'm going to bring you back together. I know I'm rushing you through the activity. It is intentional because I only have 30 to 35 minutes, and I just want you to kind of get the idea of a close reading activity. Obviously centered around this broader discussion of classroom management, but it's basically a close reading activity. And then I wanted to throw this back out there for you that if you can find ways to do this kind of targeted reading activity in your content, with your students, you might move them into this group. It doesn't say that the 20 minutes of reading has to occur outside the school setting. It just says that students who read 20 minutes a day are more likely to be in the 90th percentile. So if you can find ways to incorporate reading within your content, my goal today is to create a discussion about classroom management. But I can work reading into that, and I can work close reading into that, and I can work some discussion about the reading which increases student engagement and ignites the learning. So I thought I would throw that back up there. If you don't have that posted in your classroom, I'll resend it with today's notes, and you can post it up in your classroom for students to see. And then this is what we would have moved down to next in order to begin a report out, but we're not going to do that today. So what I want to just kind of talk about quickly today is this concept of routines and procedures and how they can help focus your class and ensure efficiency. The idea behind routines and procedures is to make sure that we're managing time well. Whoa. Is that flickering for you guys too, or is it just me?
Oh yeah.
Cool.
I'm
Yeah.
glad it does that for him. My projector does that in my classroom.
It's because I moved it.
I can try watching the movie.
I also think it's true when we talk about student engagement that when you as a teacher demonstrate that you've clearly spent time thinking about the efficiency of the classroom, it reinforces for students the value of the learning time. Time on task. We know that one of the biggest indicators of student success is time on task. An orderly and focused classroom decreases the potential for interruptions or disruptions and increases the potential for student engagement. We talked about engagement at the last PD. Really, when you stop and think about it, you get 55 minutes with each group of students, and that's really not a lot of time. I'd like to find some ways as we go forward to alter this, because I think it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. We force students into 55-minute blocks whether they need it or not. Right? Some students are prolific in math. Do they really need to sit in the math block for 55 minutes if they're struggling in science? It would be nice if we could find ways to free that up, and we have found some ways, but that's really our situation right now is we get 55 minutes. Each one of those minutes is important and precious to that student's learning opportunity. Especially when you consider that 46% of our incoming freshmen, you keep hearing me say this, right, almost every meeting. 46% of our incoming freshmen are below grade level in all 4 core content areas, and we have to move them in those 4 cores before their March of their junior year. And so those 55 minutes are valuable. We need to be as efficient as we can be in our approach to those 55 minutes each class period. If we express excitement for learning and your content through what you do, your students are more likely to be engaged. Meet them at the door. Have a procedure for the students when they start class. Make sure that learning occurs throughout the course of the class period. If we demonstrate excitement in that way, they are more likely to be excited about the content. And all of this really is part 1 of a 2-part equation. Part 2 is about relationships, and we talk about that a lot. I do what I do because I care about you and your future. It's important for them to know that. They're more likely to be engaged if they believe that. And so I recognize that this is only, the management piece is only one part of the equation that the relationship is about. And so again, if we had additional time today, I would go through this assignment. This is how I would have wrapped up the activity today. Just to think about, and you can do this on your own. I'll email this slideshow out. Think about developing a list of procedures that should be in place before students arrive. We're beyond that now, school has started. But my intent was to do this on the very first day when we met. I think it's valuable to reflect on that each year. What procedures do I need to have in place for my students before they even walk in the door? And then develop a list of procedures that will be taught on the first day, during the first week, and during the first 2 weeks. I would encourage all of you to look at the first 2 weeks of school. I know we're beyond that now, but in the future, look at the first 2 weeks of school as almost a boot camp, where I establish how I want the classroom environment to work, and I focus more on what students do in class than I focus on the content of the instruction during the first 2 weeks. I use the content, and I begin working on the content, but I'm much more focused on what I want students to learn about the learning environment. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. I have it up there, I do. So this is the lesson plan format that I used in the classroom, and actually the lesson plan format that I'm using for all the PD sessions. this year in our staff meetings as well. In the first 2 weeks of school, I always had this at the top of my lesson plan. What are my classroom management goals today? What do I want to either A, introduce to the students, B, teach to the students, or C, reinforce for the students? That's what I call the rule of 3. Just because I tell them doesn't mean they know it. I introduce it, teach it, reinforce it, and then the fourth piece is I assess it. Once I assess it and they demonstrate that they know it, now I can assume that they know it to a degree. And I would encourage you too to reflect on these as you go through the year and go back and reteach. Because we know that they're not going to carry that knowledge all the way through the year unless I reinforce it. And so I would go back and reteach those procedures. That's what I call the rule of 3. Introduce, teach, and reinforce. I have to do that even with my classroom procedures. That way, I know that I have some confidence that they know it. I want to introduce to them the procedure for getting homework when they're absent. Then I want to teach it in some way. Then I want to reinforce it. And then I have some level of belief that they know it. If all I do is put it in my syllabus, all of you know that doesn't work, right? If all I do is list it in my syllabus or mention it in class, that doesn't work. And this really is for the end. At your table, I did put a staff meeting feedback form and a performance rating like we've done in the previous meetings this year. You don't have to do those yet because we're going to shift gears here and move into some information about academic advising. And so I'm going to pass it off to Angie Nowak, who's going to talk about an academic advisory activity that she's conducting with her students in the Career Academy.
Okay, this is